In this video, I'd like to talk about causes other than animal rights. Hello again, I'm Nigel from Mad About Animals. I remember a long time ago, before I was vegan, before I was even vegetarian, I used to get quite heavily involved in all forms of social justice movements. In my very younger days, I was an active communist, and then is the word mellowed, joined the Labour Party and fought for a lot of oppressed groups. I went on anti-racist marches, supported feminist groups, homophobic groups, anti-homophobic groups, that sort of thing. I had a lot of friends who were in oppressed minorities. Whenever we went on an anti-racist march, it was almost assumed that if you were anti-racist, you were also a feminist, you were also not homophobic or Islamophobic and all those other forms of oppression. So I was surrounded by people who were feminist, were not racist, were not sexist, were not homophobic, were not Islamophobic, were not ableist. And everyone to me seemed to be like that. So I'd never experienced, for example, a person of colour who was sexist. I'd never experienced a feminist who was racist. Now, those people do exist, but generally, people who are opposed to one of those forms of oppression are very likely to be opposed to all of those forms of oppression. So if you're not racist, you're probably not sexist, you're probably a feminist, you're probably not homophobic. When I first started doing vegan outreach and handing out leaflets showing footage of slaughterhouses, chalking events, earthlings, we the free, that sort of thing, I started to talk to members of the public about animal liberation, about vegan issues, that sort of thing. And obviously, like many of you who do outreach, we speak to all sorts of people. We speak to all sorts of people with all sorts of hang-ups, with all sorts of views, with all sorts of moralities. I think I was quite naive in that I felt that if I was talking to someone who wasn't racist, that they wouldn't be speciesist either. If I was talking to someone that wasn't sexist, that they wouldn't be speciesist. Because I'd always spoke to people who weren't racist and weren't sexist. So when I started to talk to people and they say, oh yeah, I'm not racist, I'm not sexist, I'm not homophobic, I'm not Islamophobic, I'm not ableist or any of those other things. But when you talk about, well, what about speciesism? Are you speciesist? Well, first of all, many people don't even know what speciesism is. But when you explain it to them, it's like, well, that's different, isn't it? Well, why is it different? Because it doesn't affect humans? Does that make it different? Well, I suppose in a way it does, but from a moral perspective, why is it different? I remember one time in my early days of activism, there was a pride event going on in my local city, and we decided to do some outreach, some animal rights outreach. We were chalking and handing out leaflets. And I thought, wow, this is going to be a great opportunity because there are going to be so many people there. Obviously, it's Pride. There are going to be so many people there that are either gay, lesbian, trans, or whatever themselves, or are friends, relatives, family, colleagues, or certainly sympathetic to that cause. Otherwise, they wouldn't be at Pride. And of course, they were. So I thought, well, these are people who have either experienced a form of oppression because of their sexuality, their gender, their sexual orientation, or they're friends with someone, or work with someone, or relatives with someone, or love someone who has felt that form of oppression. So talking to them about any other oppression is just going to be, oh yeah, sign me up. But it wasn't like that. there were many people who just weren't interested. I remember one guy in particular, quite a brief conversation, but it was along the lines of, yeah, I'm gay and I'm at Pride to celebrate my sexuality, and fantastic, that's wonderful. What about animals? Oh, fuck animals. Nothing to do with me. I'm going to carry on eating animals. Like, but you're suffering, or you have suffered from that form of oppression for your entire life, maybe. And now we're at the stage where you probably still do suffer because society is far from perfect, but you're at the stage where you can celebrate your sexuality with all your friends and everyone who wants to celebrate your freedom to practice your sexuality, to live your life however you want to live. And yet you couldn't give a fuck about animals. How does that work then? I remember being genuinely staggered. Another time, I was talking to a lovely young couple. They were really intelligent, asked lots of insightful questions. They were asking so many thoughtful questions about what we were talking about in terms of veganism and that sort of thing. But in the end, it's like, well, it doesn't really affect us, does it? Now, maybe this is the way I was brought up, and maybe this is a little bit of inherent racism in me. Could be so, but these were people of colour. And it just occurred to me that I'm a white guy. I've never experienced racism in that respect, firsthand, towards me, because I'm a white guy. But I thought, this couple who were intelligent and caring and compassionate, and yet they couldn't give a fuck about animals because it didn't affect them. Like, well, you're members of an oppressed group. You've suffered because of your skin colour. And yet when I'm telling you about others who are suffering because of their fur, not because they're people of colour, but because let's call them people of fur, POFs, yeah, just invent that term. They are people of fur, or people of feather. You don't give a fuck about them. I just found that really, really frustrating and really bizarre. I guess in my naivety, I thought that if you had been a victim of oppression yourself, then you're more likely to be sympathetic to victims of other forms of oppression. And it's just not the case. I don't know the answer. So please, in the comments below, if you consider yourself to be in an oppressed group for whatever reason, your skin colour, your religion, your race, your creed, your ethnicity, whatever, and you're not vegan, please try to educate me. I'm genuinely interested. I want to know why you're not vegan, because I will put good money on you not being racist or sexist or homophobic or being compassionate about all the other oppressed groups that you're not a part of, other than animals. Why is that? Genuinely want to know. Now, don't get me wrong, with all those other forms of oppression, with all those other forms of activism, they're not mutually exclusive. So, for example, you can be anti-racist and anti-Islamophobic. You can be anti-sexist and anti-homophobic. You can be more than one of these things. You can be against all forms of oppression. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you need to be active in all of these things. So if your chosen cause, the cause that you spend most time on, for example, is racism, and you go to lots of anti-racist rallies and things like that, then that's absolutely fine. That's, of course, your right, your privilege. You may never go on a anti-homophobic rally or anything like that, but you're probably not homophobic. So you don't actually have to do anything other than not be that thing. So talking about people who are fighting for other causes, I'm not saying you have to fight for the animals. I'm not saying you have to come out onto the street with us and do outreach for animal liberation or anything like that. I'm just asking why you just don't become vegan. If the cause that you do most work on, if the cause that steers to your heart is gay rights, then that's fine. Of course that's fine. It's a worthwhile cause and people need to fight that cause. But while you're fighting that cause, just don't harm animals. We're not asking you to join the cause, although it would be wonderful if you did. But I accept, and we accept, that if you'd rather spend your spare time fighting for another cause, that's absolutely fine. And it needs to be done. We need to fight for those causes because there are still racists, there are still sexists, there are still homophobes, etc. There are a lot more speciesists. So we're not asking you to fight for the cause, we're just asking you to be on our side. So all I'm saying is, if you're not racist, and you're not homophobic, and you're not sexist, and all those other things, just don't be speciesist. Just eat plants. Don't wear leather. Don't ride horses. Don't abuse animals. Doesn't take anything away from the causes that are dear to your heart. Doesn't take anything away from your anti-racism and your anti-sexism or your anti-homophobia causes. They complement each other, if anything. You can be against all of those things. You can be anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobic and anti-speciesist. I've been Nigel from Mad About Animals. If you found this thought-provoking, interesting, please like, share and subscribe, and please comment below. Let's start this conversation going. Thank you very much.